Welcome to WagerTalk TV. I am Kelly Stewart, joined by our resident, we'll call him lacrosse bettor, Dan Neubert. Usually, guys don't see his beautiful bearded face because he is behind the other side of the camera doing production stuff. But he's been doing a lot of work with Andy Lang over at WagerTalk.com in regards to lacrosse. And I said, Dan, who even bets lacrosse?
I mean, it's a fair question. I know the clients of Andy Lang have definitely been betting lacrosse and been enjoying it. But this is great, Kelly. Like you said, it's usually me editing and doing things behind the scenes, especially for one of our favorite shows, Bet On It. But now I get to chat with you. I mean, an absolute treat. And who would have thought it would be lacrosse that finally got me on a video here with Kelly? But honestly, as far as who bets it, I think we've seen volume grow. I don't know if I can quite call it exponentially when you're talking about such a small market, but over the last 3 years since I started the podcast Bet On Lacrosse, we've definitely seen a higher handle coming up in the market, and that's just not anecdotal. I speak with teams with FanDuel, with DraftKings, with BetMGM about different initiatives on some of these lower bet and lower volume sports, and they've definitely seen a proliferation in the marketplace in trying to get lacrosse bettors interested because the nice thing is, especially when we're talking about the PLL, the Premier Lacrosse League, which you see there and which we'll be getting into a little bit later in the video, that's kind of my bread and butter is the PLL. It's positioned in a time of year where if you are someone who gets like baseball fatigue, you know what I think? I think any bettor over the summer knows it's just a grind betting MLB week after week. So this offers an opportunity for a lower volume market, an exciting sport that has some physicality that can maybe whet the football type appetite without going full CFL. And then you're also, making money because it's one of those lower bet markets. So while I won't say, and I think the PLL and the operators who are offering lacrosse know, it's not competing with any of the major four anytime soon. I think everyone kind of knows that, but I think just the fact with when I started that podcast, Bet on Lacrosse, we had one operator, DraftKings, who was offering lines. In just 3 years' time, we've now seen over 9 to 10 regulated sportsbooks operators. I've seen offshore lines that clearly the marketplace sees it as a viable option for bettors and for odds makers alike. So I think that it's continuing to grow, and I think videos like this and what we do with Bet on Lacrosse and PLL bets, that's only going to drive up more interest in the marketplace, which I think is a profit or, a help for bettors and sportsbooks alike.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I would not have guessed that many U.S. sportsbook offered lines on any of these, let alone the NCAA, which you did play. Did you play lacrosse in college? Remind me. Is that where you're
Yeah. So I was a D3 guy. So I did a little football D3, I did a little lacrosse, and I've coached as well. So it's a game that I've always been around, that I always loved. But the NCAA line's just absolutely exploding this last year. Even in some of the spots where they offer player props, there were lacrosse player props. So you're talking about like micro markets popping up in a market that a lot of people didn't even know was an option. I thought was pretty cool.
Dan, if 2020 taught me anything, as long as it can make me money, I will bet on it. This is way better than Nicaraguan soccer or Russian table tennis. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about how to actually bet these leagues. We've kind of already went over them. There's the NCAA, there's the PLL, and then there's the NLL. But what are we looking at? Is this similar to MLB where you're betting money lines, or are there actual spreads on these matches?
Yeah, that's a great question because across those three different leagues, you're kind of seeing different ways that these games will be lined. They do offer spreads, but when you look at spreads in like the NLL and the PLL, which are the professional leagues, NLL is National Lacrosse League. That's indoor lacrosse. It's box lacrosse. That's played throughout the winter months into the early spring. Premier Lacrosse League is field lacrosse. That's outdoor. That's played from June through September. So those are the two professional leagues. And then NCAA men's lacrosse and women's lacrosse is a spring sport as well. But when you're looking at the professional leagues, it's more lined like a puck line or a run line. You're typically only seeing 1.5 favorites with juice towards the underdog and vice versa. Sometimes you'll see 2.5 floated out in the marketplace in Premier Lacrosse League. That's been an insanely profitable trend. If you just put a blindfold on and bet 2.5 underdogs, I think you cash it around like a 70% rate. or something like that. So I know as someone who loves underdogs, you love hearing a trend like that. As a matter of fact, just here this last weekend, we had a 2-goal underdog who ended up winning outright. So anybody who sprinkled on the money line, using that trend that I always tell people, if you see a +2, you see a +2.5, hop all over it, because a lot of the time you're going to see these be 1-goal games just because of the nature of the parity that's in this league, and the fact that they're in the Premier Lacrosse League are only 8 teams. So there's teams that know each other well. Just the way that the game is set up and the rules are set up. They have 2-pointers, which is different than the NCAA. So you can see teams go on some pretty crazy runs. So you're typically going to be seeing those run lines, those puck lines. I just call them spreads because you can get them up to around 2.5. Money line bettors, same exact way that you're going to see it. You're going to see your underdog getting some nice plus money, and you're going to have to lay a little bit of juice, lay a little bit of vig if you want to back the favorite. And then the totals, you're pretty much in Premier Lacrosse League going to be seeing totals around 23, 24.5 is really that sweet spot. You know how the NFL kind of gets pigeonholed into having their numbers, and then they play off of whatever those totals are. If you have 2 high-scoring teams, 2 lower-scoring teams. So typically you can expect around a 23.5 to 24.5. If they go higher than that, that's when you really start seeing some value in the marketplace. But I'll tell you what, over the last 3 years, while it's been great having more and more offerings, it does make you get a little bit more selective. You know what I mean? Like, I can't just throw a dart at the board and go, 10-0 in any given week. So as more data comes in for these sports books, as more quote unquote sharp bettors come into the marketplace on lacrosse, you're seeing these markets get a little bit stronger. But as far as, when you look at the board and are trying to understand it, it's very similar to what you're going to see in some of those other sports.
All right. On that note, I want to know how to actually get an edge in lacrosse. Like, what is defining you from just me? I log into my sportsbook app. I see a lacrosse match with a team that I know. Let's use the Water Dogs. That might be the only PLL team that I have ever heard of.
A lot.
I'm going to laugh out of you because it seems to be the one that's talked about most on my Twitter timeline. But are you paying for a premium for some of those more well-known teams? Where can you find an edge similarly to I'm trying to find an edge in college football?
Yeah, I think another, terrific question, because that's really what you're looking to do across all sports, whether it's football, whether it's lacrosse, whether it's, as you said, Russian table tennis. Like, if you have a bead on Ivan Stravanovanovsky, you're going to try and find an edge in that marketplace. So really what I like to do is I have a team of guys with what we do with Bet On Lacrosse and the podcast that we have, that we track all of the lines. Where did they open? Where did they close? We originate our own lines and we say, hey, this is going to be 2 points off market. So for a casual bettor trying to find an edge, I think a major edge that you can have is even if you're just watching the games. You know what I mean? Like I feel like that feels so obvious, but it's something that our man Andrew McGinnis has talked about in his ability to find edge in the CFL, is when all of these sports are going on, especially when you find that sweet spot where Major League Baseball is still going on, the beginning of the NFL season is going on, there's just too much on the board, but the operators want to continue offering some of these side sports that they have throughout the entire season. So while there's not as much attention paid, the quiet time, so to speak, is when you can really find an edge. But I think what helps me is using historical data. And we have a report called the Bet On Lacrosse report that if people reach out to me on Twitter at Newbie Talks, we can get you added right into it. Since lines were offered in 2021, we've tracked every spread, who's covered, who's gone over, who's gone under. So we have, 3 years of data, and it gets updated every single week on Tuesday of what happened the last week, of teams that are good as underdogs, teams that are bad as underdogs. And again, trends are never going to be an absolute guarantor of future success. But if you're able to partner those trends that you're having and this season-long data that's really easy to find using that report, and then you watch a couple games, oh my God, this is a slam dunk spot for the Water Dogs because they've never covered against this team, but this team is a favorite only because they've never covered against this team. So you really can find some really advantageous spots. And I feel like that's where you find your biggest edge. Like, for instance, there was just a 2-week layoff that just happened. So having 2 weeks of a hole in a season, there was a lot of recency bias that ended up being in the lines. And someone like me who's tracking the lines, who's paying attention, it's like, why is this team a favorite just because they won 2 weeks ago? Does that really matter? Again, there's no slam dunk spots, but using those kind of plays, we did make some money this last weekend. So if you're paying attention, if you're using data, and bigger than anything, if you're watching the games and kind of know what needs to happen in the standings, these are things that the sports books, I don't think, are really accounting for just yet. They're more just plugging in, this team scores 13 goals a game, this team scores 11 goals a game, so this team's going to be a 1.5 point favorite. They're a little too data-driven and not going with enough narrative or nuance. So I think that's where we really find some really nice money-making opportunities.
I love it. The eye test is not dead yet. It might be dead in the NFL, but it's not dead in the PLL. Last but not least, what tips would you like to give someone like me who wants to try betting lacrosse but has yet to do so?
Yeah, I think it's going to circle back to just check it out. Just check out the games. A lot of people, if you have ESPN Plus, you can stream any of these games, so it's easily accessed. They have a nice linear television deal with the Premier Lacrosse League, so you get them on ABC, you get them on ESPN, ESPN2, so you're able to see it. You're able to go into a sports bar and be like, hey, could you put a lacrosse game on? Everyone will look at you weird. Everyone will be like, what the hell is this guy talking about? But they will throw them on. So I think one of the biggest things is just check out the league. And also, if you're going to try and get into betting it at first, I always suggest, if you're getting into a new market, again, shameless plug, follow people who know what they're talking about. You know what I mean? When you hear me talking about proliferation of markets, things like that, these are things that I learned by listening to people who are smarter than me. And that's one of my biggest tips for any sports bettor, whether it's in lacrosse, whether it's in any sport that you're trying to get down on. Find experts or people who have bet in the space that you know and trust. I, in my time following sports betting, have learned so much from so many different people. So I think that's a big suggestion that I would have. Find analysts that you actually trust and get some information from them. And when you couple their opinions with maybe some opinions that you form, I even just look at people I've gone back and forth with on Twitter that asked me at the beginning of the season, hey, I want to get into lacrosse. And now I'm seeing them sharing out graphics of, here's my entire slate, here's what I'm getting into, and they're cashing tickets. So these are people who came in just saying, I want to add something new. I'm tired of betting baseball. And now they're making money by the year's end. And another thing is too, Kelly, when people are trying to get into a new market, it's how much money can I get down for people who really want to use sports betting as a second income. Which we always suggest, if you are going to do that, make sure you be responsible. Make sure that you practice good bankroll management and percentage of plays, things like that, things that we here at WagerTalk teach you how to do. And as long as you're doing that and you're not putting X amount of your bankroll in play, you're going to see a little bit of money coming in, and you might just end up absolutely loving lacrosse as a sport because of it. But if you, like me, got tired of betting baseball year in and year out, there's a new option for you throughout the summer. It's Premier Lacrosse League, and you can get down. Let's say you're $100 bettor, you can get down a couple $100 easy. You know what I mean? And some of these markets are wondering how much are you able to get down. A video that we just put out on Premier Lacrosse or PLL Bets, the one Twitter page that I run. Adam Pac-Man Jones, right? He's no sharp bettor, but he's a guy who has money, who wants to spend, who wants to have. He was out at one of these games, and he was able to get a $3,500 live bet in on Premier Lacrosse League. So you are able to get money down on these games. So, and he showed it on his screen, so it wasn't, it wasn't cap, it wasn't him live, it wasn't any of that. So you are able to bet in these markets, which I think is one thing that always turns people off. Okay, I can make $50 here or there. It seems like operators are taking it seriously. It seems like they are confident enough in their numbers that they're willing to take volume, and that's where we come in. And then hopefully don't get limited in the process. I guess that's the way that we try and do it, Kelly.
That's always the caveat. Don't bet too much and too much sharp stuff, because you will
just throw in a parlay every now and then. You know what I mean? Like, that's people are like, how do you want
bogus parlay? Throw them off the set. Is that what we're supposed to do?
That's what you got to do. It's kind of like tongue in cheek, but that's what I end up doing. I'm just like, all right, let me just throw together a 3-leg player prop parlay, and I haven't gotten limited yet, and I've continued to make money 3 years straight in Premier Lacrosse League. So I while don't do it as like a 5-unit play, throw in some donkey bets every now and then it just throw the set off, right? That's the way that I do it.
Absolutely hilarious. Make sure you guys are following at PLLBet, at Newbie Talks on Twitter. You guys can get all of his free Premier League Premier Lacrosse League. Good grief if I didn't screw that up already 3 times in this video. If you can get all of his plays over there. And if you're looking for some more of his premium plays, you can head over to WagerTalk.com and check out Andy Lang's plays. I had no idea Dan Newby is got a ghostwriter for lacrosse. Here we are. WagerTalk.com.
Hey, if people like you said, Kelly, if people can make money on it, they want to bet it. When we didn't have plays for 2 weeks, people were messaging Andy and saying, "Where's my lacrosse plays?" So the interest is there. So definitely head on over.
The league was on a hiatus. They thought Andy Lang was on vacation, and they were fiending.
Exactly.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Dan Newby. Neubert for just end the video. Thank you, Dan.